There's two kinds of people in the world. There's people who have run for office, and there's everybody else. It's such a unique experience that you go through, and there's a lot of experiences that people have in terms of way you serve, and I'm sure in military and certain types of jobs, whatever it is. These are things that people don't really go through in your normal everyday lives. And so to be a candidate, to be part of that, I think is really a special experience. It also gives you, as a person, a different perspective that you'll have. You'll feel it while you're doing it. You feel some of it now, but when it's over, win or lose, when it's over, you will be a different person because you will have gone through this. And that is what we carry with us.
What does it really take to run for local office? On The Candidate, we're pulling back the curtain on the messy, expensive, and sometimes bizarre world of local politics. Join us as we share the unfiltered truth about what happens before you see those campaign signs pop up in your neighborhood. We're following serial entrepreneur Dave Kerpen as he dives headfirst into the world of local politics. Ready for a change in the world? This is your opportunity to be the candidate.
Today's guest on The Candidate is no stranger to public service or the complex realities of governing at every level. Jon Kaiman is a 5-term former town supervisor of North Hampstead, the job that I am running for now. He's a past deputy county executive of Suffolk County and a key player in New York's statewide recovery efforts after Superstorm Sandy. Currently serves as the president of New York State's Tax Appeals Tribunal. But most important to me, Jon has been the single best a mentor and friend related to this totally new and crazy journey of mine as the candidate. So without further ado, I am super grateful both for his mentorship and for his appearing on the show to welcome Jon Kaiman to The Candidate. How are you, Jon?
I am good, Dave. I am good. Glad to be here. Glad to see you up and off and running as you are. You're out there. You're doing great things, and very exciting, challenging but exciting. And really, I'm interested in continuing this dialogue here today, but throughout the whole journey that you're taking.
Yes. So talk about challenging. I saw Jon last night at a fundraiser, which thank you again for coming and supporting my campaign. And I recalled the time we met in the diner a few months ago when I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Jon was the first person I went to. And we had this conversation. Jon kind of laid out what the next several months would look like in the candidacy. And there was one point where, Jon was being really real with me. And, I said, Jon, are you trying to talk me into this or talk me out of this? And tell me a little bit about what you saw as the biggest challenges. I mean, you ran for this job just 2 years ago, and you were a known entity. You were you were not an incumbent per se, but you had the job before, and yet the Republicans still spent a lot of money and went very negative and unfortunately beat you a couple years ago. Tell me a little bit about what went through your head when this younger ambitious kid comes to you and says, hey, he wants to go for it.
The first step is somebody just putting themselves out there and saying, I'm interested. And you did that, and you've kind of put out some feelers and reached out. And, I've been doing this a long time and seeing candidates come and go, people who raise that flag, I want to do this. And there's a lot that goes into running for office. It's, we are this wonderful nation where, citizens can put themselves forward and run for any public office. And there's rules and protocols and things that you have to do. And so when I had the chance to sit down with you to see that you were taking that first step, the question is, to any candidate, are you really up for this? This is hard, and it's hard, because there's a level of vulnerability that any candidate has to have. You put yourself out there, opening yourself up to people, challenging your credentials, your commitment, your abilities, your persona, virtually everything about you. And that's the first thing that you need to realize, or any candidate needs to realize. Am I willing to have darts thrown at me, and can I continue to move forward? And then there's just the challenges of organization, of raising money, of crafting a message, of understanding the office that you're running against. I once ran for when I was very young, ran for district attorney of Nassau County, and the party leaders had asked me to run, and I wasn't really thinking of being a candidate, and I had no preparation. It was just they just needed somebody. We had virtually no chance of winning. It was a time when Republicans, and I was a Democrat, Republicans controlled virtually everything in Nassau County. And then my first interview with the reporter just said to me, one of the first questions was, why are you running for this office? And I said to her, if I knew you were going to ask such difficult questions, I wouldn't have agreed to the interview. And so and it really is, to me, a very important statement, because, you need to know why you're running for office. There needs to be a purpose behind it. There needs to be a reason. And so the first conversation with you is there a rationale for why you're doing this? Is it just I'm bored? Is it ego? Is it whatever it is? There has to be, something deeper in it. And so the conversation that we had, I think you clearly expressed, where you're coming from, that there is purpose behind what you're doing, that you have the wherewithal to move this process forward, and that you really want to be able to make a difference, have an impact on your community. You have the skills to do it. You have a background that will allow you to achieve and to have that success. And so I left there thinking that we had a good candidate at our doorstep, and the next question would be, do you take those next steps? And you clearly have. And so it's good to see you on the campaign trail, because Dave, you're a great candidate, and you'll be an excellent supervisor.
Thank you, John. I will say, a few months in, I think this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my career. But I'm having a lot of fun along the way. And last night was an example. It's like people that have known me for years and people that I've never met in my life all coming together and giving little old me money to help me run this crazy campaign. How can I not be super grateful and super happy about that? Like, it's just like last night was one of those great moments where I was like, wow, it really is all worth it. And then I went to another fundraiser, and I met this great comedian and great neck show. She was amazing, by the way, John, Talia Reese. And of course, now she's going to help me convince the Great Neck Jewish voters that there are Democrats out there that are still super pro-Israel and worth supporting and voting. So it was a wonderful night overall. One of the other things you said to me was, win or lose, you're part of the story now. You're part of the club, and I didn't realize it at the time how meaningful that would be. But I have to say, a few months in, I get it. I get it now. There's just all these learnings, and part of the point of the podcast is to share everything that I've learned along the way with others that maybe choose to run for office. There are all these learnings, and it's like I feel like you and I now have a camaraderie basically for the rest of our lives, win or lose, where like we both get what it's like to run for town supervisor in town of North Hempstead, or really probably any office, because there's a lot of things in common. Have you been able to build relationships with other candidates over the years based on that kind of we're all in it together kind of philosophy?
Yeah, I think I've said it that there's two kinds of people in the world. There's people who have run for office, and there's everybody else. It's such a unique experience that you go through, and there's a lot of experiences that people have when in terms of way you serve, and I'm sure in military and certain types of jobs, whatever it is. But as a candidate, to go through this process, I've won races and I've lost races, there's things that are out of your control. There's the time, there's the moment, there's the opponent, there's the geography. There's all these different things that go into it, and some of it's in your control and some of it's out of your control. And that feeling of, I don't want to say helplessness, but there's that feeling that you have to rely on others to navigate this process. You can't do it alone. It's impossible to do it alone. You need people to vote for you. So that's by its very nature. You have to include your community. You have to give people the chance to vote yes or no for you, to judge you, to literally reject you or accept you. And that's a powerful thing to go through. To go to your neighbors and say, first of all, will you even talk to me? Will you give me the time of day? Will you to go to somebody and ask them to write you a check, to put their name on an endorsement, to show up at an event. These are things that people don't really go through in your normal everyday lives. And so to be a candidate, to be part of that, I think is really a special experience. And we do, you go through that together. And so having that experience behind us, it also gives you as a person a different perspective that you'll have. You'll feel it while you're doing it. You feel some of it now, but when it's over, win or lose, when it's over, you will be a different person because you will have gone through this. And that is what we carry with us. And the goal, the hope is that when someone goes through this, they don't, say, okay, I've done it and I walk away. There's a lot of ways to serve, by the way. You don't have to be elected, but to try it, to do it, to say, what, I'm going to stick with this idea of serving the community, the public, and I'm going to find a way to do that. Get elected, you do that. And by the way, when you're elected, every election, there's someone else is going to come along and say, you know what, I'm going to take your job. You're not good enough. You haven't, succeeded. You're this, that, and all these terrible, horrible things. Some true and some not true, by the way. The context, it's all this other stuff. So the notion that someone's trying to take your job away from you publicly it's a pretty incredible thing to go through. And so it's something that you're in the process of. You're in that chrysalis that'll eventually emerge as a full-blown person who's been through this once it's done. And the goal, of course, is to get to the other side of this experience as the victor. And that's the direction where we're going to do everything we can to get there with you.
Yeah, awesome. I have a bunch of questions that I think our audience would love to hear the answers to because you've had such an interesting career. But I have one super selfish question first, because you literally ran for the job that I'm running for here 2 years ago, and lost. What if you could go back? What is one thing that what's the biggest thing you would change? What, if anything, would you do differently if you could go back to the town supervisor race 2 years ago?
It's a legitimate question. I've run for this position obviously and won, and I've run for this position recently and lost. And again, it's the time, it's the moment, the party I'm with. I'm running as a Democrat 2 years ago, and the Democrats on Long Island especially, and throughout the state, throughout the country, we're kind of up against the wall. Still are in many respects. Hopefully, we're coming through that. There's things, when I talk about things out of our control, there's things that are going on in New York City. There's things that the council there are doing, things that are pushing the reputation of the party in such a direction that people out here don't feel comfortable supporting a Democrat. And that's what we were going through for years. Very popular people had very difficult, challenging elections. What went on in Israel, October 7th happened, shortly before, and that impacted a lot of voters within our community of how they saw themselves. This is a reflection of voters, or an election is a reflection of the voter, not necessarily the candidate. It's a reflection of the voter, where they are, what they think, what they feel, and how to tap into that. And then there's so what I would change. I had a campaign where our opponents mailed about 40 to 50, maybe 50 plus mailings against me every 3 days since the summer. Early in June or July, they started with these mailings, millions of dollars of commercials. I think they spent $2+ million for a supervisor race. Hopefully, they're not doing that again. But there's, in terms of doing differently, it's, some people say I should have been more negative. It should have been, tougher. You should have, it's. I don't really go back and just break down what I've done. What could I just don't think in those terms. You run, you do everything you can. As a professional person who wants to win elections, who wants people to win elections, who has a sense of how this should work. I assess the designs of the lit pieces and the amount of money we raise, and obviously we could always raise more money, but we spent a significant amount. Can I change the times that we were in? I can't do that. The polling had me very much ahead, and then as time went on, we just got crushed by the time that we were in. I think is really what it was. And so I would suggest to any candidate, it's seize the moment. Your campaign is the moment that you're in, and when it's over, it's over. You can't let it weigh you down and crush you and just kind of rethink it over and over. It's you can't even as a they say generals always fight the last battle. Every campaign has its own personality. It's again the time that you're in, the what's going on around the world, what's going on politically, what's going on in the lives of the voters that are going to make this decision. That's what you and any candidate needs to assess. So past campaigns are, you look at statistics, you look at the numbers, how many voters go this way, that way, where are the independents, where are the people that can move, and that's all important. But it's really think of this as each campaign has its own personality. You're creating the personality of that campaign by you being who you are, and so that now has to get filtered in. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that. And as a 7-time entrepreneur, I love the idea of being able to build my own brand, my own story here. And really, one thing I've learned in my business career is the importance of timing and understanding the macro trends that are outside of our control. I launched a social media agency at just the right time, and it exploded. And then I launched a social media software company too early, and it didn't take off, right? So timing is really important, and understanding how to your point, seize the moment and build around the particular time is really key. Let's go back to your time as town supervisor. You did some really, really important things that maybe some of our listeners some years later may not fully credit to you, but I'm going to, for the world to know. Jon, you launched one of the first ever municipal 311 systems. That's not very flashy, but it was clearly transformative. Walk us through the story of how 311 came to life.
So we were the first suburban 311 in the country. There was a number of cities that had 311, New York City as well. 311 started in Baltimore. The mayor of Baltimore, a man named Martin O'Malley, who was a friend of mine when we were both in law school. We worked on Gary Hart's campaign. He was the national field director. I was the New York State campaign manager for Gary Hart while we were in law school. And we got to know each other. And he became mayor of Baltimore after that as we grew older. And he got the idea of marrying the idea of a 911 concept where you take 311 for municipal services. And so if you call 311 and you get your pothole filled in 24 hours or 48 hours, or you get your garbage picked up, or you find out information about your community. And it was this incredible application of this technology at the time, 311, which is now it's considered consumer customer management system kind of thing, like a Salesforce concept. But back then it was simply the idea of taking this number, using this technology and marrying it to these services. So I met with him. He came out actually to North Hempstead, and the experience actually goes back a little before that. I had my own law practice. I actually joined the town as commissioner of public safety years earlier, and the building department at the time was a big challenge. And there's a lot of all sorts of negativity there. And this is the late '90s, by the way, and you can see that hasn't changed. And so I actually, the town supervisor at the time, May Newhugger, said to me, if you could try these major legal cases, you can handle the building department. And I went and I told them, I want to know how many code tickets you're writing, how many inspections are you doing, and all this. And they told me they don't have to tell me. They don't have to, they're not giving me any information. They said they're civil service, they're this, I'm whatever. I'm just going to go away at some point. And for 2 years, I tried to get new technology. I tried to get them, I bought them little books to check. Every time you do an inspection, put a line and then another line. And when you get to 5, do just to get some sense of statistical analysis so that we can kind of figure out how to manage properly, right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so after 2 years, they said, you're going to waste some time. And it turns out they were right. Tom DiNapoli was a leader. At some point, I got appointed as a district court judge, and I did leave. But I never solved that problem. I never got the analytics that I needed. And we were never as responsive as we needed to be. And so when I came back, I ran for a town supervisor and won. First thing I did was go to that bar. I said, now I have a system. My friend, the mayor, has 311. We're gonna wipe out the whole thing. And we did an analysis that we hired a company to do it. They said people call in North Hempstead, they would get transferred 8 times at the minimum before their call ended. And the call didn't end because their problem got solved. The call could end just because the person gave up. The call could end for any other reason. And so what a waste, what an inefficient system we had, that people are calling the town. They don't know how to get an answer. They call everyone who gets gets a call, says, you know what, it's a different department. You know, you don't want building department, you want public safety. You don't want public safety, you want the parks. You don't want parks, you want the councilman's office. And the calls just went around in circles. And so no one was accountable. Nobody knew who called. There was no record of the calls coming in. And so 311 was this incredible mechanism for a management system at the end of the day, so that we could hold ourselves accountable. We can know every call that comes in. We can make sure that every call gets resolved within X time. And what I did is I gave every single thing that we do in the town a time period. So if you want a pothole filled, we'll do it in 48 hours. If you want your street light changed because it burned out, you get it done in 3 days. If you want to know what time the park closes, you'll find out within 2 hours. If you want to plant a tree, it could be within a year. In other words, it doesn't mean it's quick, but we're going to give you a real time as to what it takes. You want a tree stump removed, that's going to take a year. A tree would take 6 months. So, and the way 311 works is the person calls and says, I want to plant a tree. The call taker types in tree, and all the questions you ask about planting a tree go in there. And then it's all recorded, and even the conversation is recorded. And so it was just this incredible mechanism to be able to serve the public, to give people confidence that government works for them, that they know they're calling and that their call is not getting lost into some black hole and disappearing. And that to me is one of the most important things about government. People need to have confidence that their government can be relied on, it could be trusted, that they're listening, that they're doing their job, that they're expected to do, and that when we fail, which is, we make mistakes, at least we find out where. You can call 311 today and find out that I called 5 years ago about a pothole on my street. I'd like to know what day I called and what day the pothole is filled. And you can find that out today because the system records virtually everything. That's accountability. And that gives, I believe, people some level of confidence in their government.
Totally. Accountability is so huge. People understand when others mess up, it's when they don't take accountability or they're not responsive or they don't listen, that's really the problem. Another huge thing that you launched was Project Independence, and it's really become one of the top programs for seniors, I think, in the country. Tell me a little bit about how Project Independence came about and what you learned along the way.
Yeah, so Project Independence, one of there was a few people that were working in our community services, and they wanted to apply for a grant for like $80,000 so that we can have one of our staffers paid to work on what's called NORCs, a naturally occurring retirement community, NORC. And if we got this grant, that person will be assigned to a NORC. A NORC, by the way, technically, is a census district, whatever it is, which is very small, where 40% of the people who live in that are 60 years or older. And that means it's a concentration of seniors. And so I applied for the grant, we got it, and I immediately became kind of frustrated with the concept of the NORC. Because what the NORC said is, we'll get these extra resources for these little pockets of the town where we have this concentration of seniors. By the way, in the city, that could be one building. The census tract, you have one building, we'll have that, so it's different in the suburbs. So I wanted to take this city concept and apply it to the suburbs. That made sense to the suburban community, except that we don't have one building. A census tract in the suburbs can be several blocks, and it could cut through a house and cut through a yard. And so I said, I want to create a program that actually meets the real need. And the real need is with the NORC, what you do is you provide additional services where there's a concentration of seniors. And so you have, extra medical assistants and dental vans and all that stuff. So I wanted to take that and apply that to the entire town. Now, this is a town, 240,000 people. It's the fifth largest town in the United States of America. It covers a lot of geography, a lot of real estate. There's diversity within this town from community to community to community in terms of how they see their neighborhood and community. They all want their neighborhood to be treated as its own identity. So Manhasset wants to be like Manhasset, and Great Neck, and New Hyde Park, and Westbury, and Mineola. And so what I did is I divided the town into 8 sectors, and we created a board of seniors from each of those groups, each of those regions, and applied for resources to provide a concentration of services for seniors, including partner with the hospital to get visiting nurses and visiting doctors, visiting social workers for people who are having some level of distress or emotional issues that they need to address. if you're depressed and and you could have $1 million or $5, you're still depressed and it's unhealthy. So you need to talk to somebody, and there's it's difficult to find or get the courage to do that. So the greatest achievement through Project Independence was to marry it to the 311 system. And so the idea was, if you're a senior in North Hempstead, or you have a parent who you're looking for assistance for, you call 311, and immediately when we pick it up, you say, I want to be part of Project Independence. You're in. You're part of the club. You're part of 311. You're part of Project Independence. We don't see how much money you make. We don't care where you live. You're in the town. You're part of it. We created a confidentiality part of it, because we had to create firewalls, because a lot of the stuff they give us is confidential. And so you can call 311 and tell us that whatever your issue was, and we had educational things and medical things and dentistry and, like I said, social workers. But what we learned is the biggest thing, and this is what you'll find for seniors, the biggest challenge for seniors as you're aging, and the whole idea, by the way, is aging in place, right? If you live longer if you live in your own home, your own neighborhood, than if you go to a nursing home. And so the idea is, how do you let people live in the house or the community that they helped grow for their entire adult lives, maybe their entire lives? How do you stay? The biggest challenge is transportation. As people get older, it's more difficult to get from one place to another. You can't drive at night, you can't drive at all, whatever it is. How do you take the keys away from somebody who's losing their ability to drive? In North Hempstead, we had these huge, as many communities do, these huge buses that drive around and take seniors to like supermarkets. And it says Town of North Hempstead on it. And there'd be like 2 people on a bus. Yet we'd have this huge bus belching its whatever through the noise and going through our neighborhoods. And I made the comment to our staff in Project Independence as we created it, it'd be cheaper to hire a taxi to take these 2 people than it would to pay for this whole bus. And that was kind of a bright light moment, because I called the local taxi company, and we were in a recession at the time. And I said, how much would you charge me to rent all your taxis in Port Washington? I actually called the Port Washington taxi company. I said, how much would you charge me? He said, what are you talking about? I said, I want to rent all your... I said, well, we use our taxis in the morning, at least. In the afternoon, they're kind of, in the middle of the day. I said, okay, I'll take 4 of them. I'll take 6 of them. And I want you to pick up seniors when they call 311, and you're going to take them to a supermarket. And we're going to pay for it. And so I got a grant, by the way, and we ended up taking seniors to supermarkets. But the biggest challenge is taking them to medical offices, and it became way too expensive to take them. So I called the taxi companies up again, and I said, this is what I want to do. Someone calls 311, they want to visit to the medical. How much would you charge me to take someone in a taxi? They gave me the price. I said, it's too expensive. You got to give me a discounted rate. So they gave me the Medicare rate. So an $18 taxi ride would be $10 or $9. Or $8. And so just say it was $8. I'd say, okay, the town will pay half of it, and the homeowner, the senior, will pay the other half. So they're getting an $18 taxi ride for $4 or $5 or whatever it is. We went in our first full year of this system, where both the supermarket visits and the medical visits, from 2,500 people taking the buses in one year to 25,000 people calling 311 and getting rides to the medical visits or supermarkets. Wow. I then took some of these buses offline, because we didn't need the buses anymore. By taking 2 buses offline, I saved the salaries of $2 $80,000 salaries plus benefits. That's $120,000 when you add their medical and all this. I didn't fire people, by the way. I just assigned them to other jobs when people retired. So I saved 2 salaries. I got 2 buses off the road. I ended up saving like $300,000 a year. The program cost me $250,000 a year. I was actually making money by providing service to 24,000 more, 22,000 more people. And it was better service. It was door-to-door service. So we improved the service. We improved the breadth and width and depth of the program. We actually saved money. And then I got a $1 million grant from Senator Clinton at the time, and Senator Schumer both jumped into this program. Then Senator Gillibrand afterwards gave us $1 million each year. So we ended up getting millions of dollars in grants for the program, to which we then expanded it. We got a building. We brought a whole new more social workers in. So anyway, so that was really the idea behind it, to give people anywhere in the country. Like, you could live in Oregon and you have a parent who lives in New Hyde Park, and you're just worried. They haven't answered the phone. Call 311. We'll send someone over there, knock on their door, and say, listen, just making sure you're okay. That kind of thing, just giving people confidence that they could trust their local government to take care of them when they need us in a way that's responsible, efficient, and empathetic, humane, all these other things. So it just turned out to be a great program.
An amazing program. And I have to tell you, just hanging out with you and talking with you on this podcast leaves me feeling really, really inspired, because that's the kind of thing I want to do as town supervisor, is see problems and find creative solutions precisely the way that you did, Jon. Jon, I could talk with you for much longer, but we're pretty much already out of time. I might have to ask you back on the Candidate podcast, because I have so many other things I want to talk about. In the meantime, I'm going to do a super quick speed round here.
Okay.
So in 20 seconds or less on each answer, who do you call when you need advice?
My wife.
Good answer. Who's the most underrated power player in New York politics right now?
Underrated power player, probably Tom DiNapoli.
Cool. If you could go back to
Of
your
New York State
30-year-old...
Controller, by the way, for those who are watching. He's a state controller, very low key guy, but has a great deal of influence, power, and really is a tremendous public servant and respected up and down the line. So yeah.
Another guy I called early on, and Jess, another potentially good guest for the podcast. If you could go back to your 30-year-old self and say one thing before your first campaign, what would it be?
Make sure I made a living before I launched this career of mine, and have some of those resources in the bank. You need to have your own resources to do this properly. Not to just it's healthier if you can afford your own dinners and you can take care of your own responsibilities. So yeah, make sure.
Fair enough.
Which I did to some extent. I had my own law firm for 7 years and did. I thought I did that, but I could have done it. Maybe couple more years might have been a good idea.
And finally, politics would be better if
we all gave people a little more space to be who they are, to make our mistakes, to be to give people a little more grace in this world when we don't fit people's expectations. I think we'd all be a little better off, or much better off.
Love it. And thanks in advance, world, for giving me grace and space when I screw up. I'm sure it will happen. Jon Kaiman, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Everyone else, thank you so much for listening, for watching, for subscribing, for leaving your reviews, and we will talk to you next time. Bye for now.
Paid for by the Friends of Dave Kerpen.
Thanks for going behind the scenes with us on The Candidate. If you enjoyed getting the real story about running for office, take a moment to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Your support means the world to us. See you next time.